My husband was racist to my newborn baby because he thought I cheated. Now that he knows the truth, he's begging for my forgiveness. I gave birth to my daughter 6 months ago and it should have been the happiest moment in my life. When my daughter was born, her skin was very dark and looked like she could have 2 biological parents who were of African descent. My husband Jim was furious, so he accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened, made posts on social media, and wanted a divorce. His family and a lot of our friends all called to say how upset they were at me and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time and I kept professing my innocence. Jim refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw my stuff out on the lawn and changed the locks, so I had to stay with my parents. When my sister called to ask for the baby stuff, Jim texted me pictures of the bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio and the art I made. He even told me my work would be too awful to sell. I was distraught and tried to focus on my baby. Weeks went by and Jim refused to speak to me directly. He has never once asked about our child. Eventually he agreed to do a paternity test and he was 100% the father. No one could believe the results, so it was done again. Jim's the dad. Around that same time, one of Jim's cousins did the ancestry thing and there was around 30% of African ancestry in the family. This combined with the test, Jim's paternal great-grandmother admitted to having an affair around the time Jim's grandfather was born, and because he could pass she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then, Jim has been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize. While it did feel good to feel vindicated, the damage has been done. I can't unhear or unsee all the horrible things that were said and done. Not just to me but to my child as well. Jim made some very racist remarks, things that I thought he'd never say, and he did it so easily. Regardless of what our daughter looks like, I don't want her to be around that. What else will Jim and his family say or do the next time they get mad? How are they going to treat our daughter when she does something that upsets them? Jim has been begging for forgiveness. I said I needed time. He asked to see the baby and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. He's repairing the nursery and keeps asking me what I would like. I cry every time, saying we already had what I liked and some of the items that we have can't be replaced. He asked me if I still loved him and I admitted that he showed me his worst self, so I don't know if I could live with that image. I didn't mean to be hurtful, but it's how I feel. My sister suggested couples therapy, but I don't feel like I should have to work to fix something that I didn't break. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent in all of this the whole. Am I wrong for not wanting to give Jim a second chance? Update: one of the reasons Jim wouldn't pick me up from the hospital was because I wouldn't admit to cheating or give him any details, because there weren't any, which made him angrier. Based on the pictures Jim sent me, he didn't take a sledgehammer to the crib or anything. He just took stuff down to either return it for the money or gave it away. While deeply hurtful, I wouldn't call it violent, but maybe it is. Online he announced that I pushed out a dark-skinned baby and he was going to divorce me. His family started with the racial comments and eventually he started doing it too, but only through my family. He refused to speak to me directly. Once the truth came out, everything he and his family posted were taken down, but I, and a few friends, still have the screenshots. Jim never wrote down his racial remarks. While he didn't say any of the racist words, he did make comments about our daughter being a welfare princess, and how I was going to be just another baby mama. Just to clarify, Jim is white and I am at least half white. One of my parents is adopted, and with everything that's happened, they decided to do the ancestry thing too. My parents had at least 45% American ancestry, which means I have at least 20%. I am legally separated from my husband with primary custody, and I'm living with my parents until further notice. He still keeps apologizing and wants me to come back to the house. He even offered to leave so I could stay with our daughter, but I don't want to and really like having the support of my parents. My dad is retired, so he does a lot of the babysitting while my mother and I work remotely. I do go to the house every so often so Jim can see his daughter and for couples counseling via telecom. In one of the sessions, Jim confessed something really hurtful. He cheated. It was while we were dating, before he proposed, and his treatment towards me was a projection. It was with an ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him and he hooked up with her as an ego boost. He started to feel guilty but was too scared that I would walk away to ever confess. Jim also admitted that he was scared when I got pregnant since our baby wasn't planned. He was very anxious about being a father, but just pretended to be excited because he didn't want to look like an a-hole. My husband was so willing to believe that our daughter wasn't his because he thought he had an out. Now that he knows that our child is his and has spent time with her, Jim regrets everything and just wants his family back. He is willing to spend the rest of his life making it up to us. This was all deeply hurtful and I've cried about it more than once. Jim has been lying to me and my ability to trust him hasn't improved at all. When the holidays came around, Jim's parents asked about seeing their grandchild and I didn't want to. They told me that it was selfish of me to keep her away and I reminded them of their past. They said that they've already apologized and tried to minimize the situation. They said that I can't be angry forever and that I need to learn to forgive them. I'm so ashamed of ever loving and marrying into this family. I've decided to contact a lawyer and will be filing for divorce after my daughter's first birthday. My narcissistic ex-boyfriend poisoned me over a LinkedIn bio, but he accidentally gave me a golden ticket to Harvard. Basically, my high school rival was a guy named Nathan. He and I were super similar. We were co-presidents of the same clubs, had similar academic portfolios, had done research papers together, and we spent a lot of time together. So despite being known as academic enemies, Nathan and I were actually in a relationship for 2 years of high school. Now those were years that I really valued and enjoyed. Nathan took pretty much all my firsts. But, once the time for college applications rolled around, Nathan dumped me, saying that he needed to focus if he wanted to get into Harvard and he couldn't be distracted with me. This made me upset for a number of reasons, mainly because he called our 2-year relationship a distraction, but also because Harvard was also my dream school, and I didn't appreciate the way Nathan just assumed he would get in over me, even though he would be the final reason I hacked my brain and managed to get in. And so, just like that, our academic rivalry was back and we each had something to prove. But I never could have prepared myself for the lengths Nathan would go to, just to beat me. Everything went downhill at this debate competition, a 4-day international conference in DC that we had been preparing for all year. This was the final big competition before college applications were due and our final chance to prove that we belonged at an Ivy League school. Everyone was tense, not just me and Nathan, and everyone wanted to win. But wanting to win will never excuse what Nathan did, even though I'm incredibly grateful for it, because his stupidity changed my life drastically for the better. It first started on the train to DC when Nathan changed seats so that we would be next to each other. It was a little awkward, but I thought that this was just Nathan's way of trying to apologize for all the unpleasant tension between us. So I let my guard down and didn't think anything suspicious of it. For the remainder of the trip, Nathan tried acting like my friend. That train ride, he treated me like he used to. We spent time studying together, laughed over some inside jokes, and we even practiced our speeches in front of each other. I started to think this competition would be good for us, to make him realize that we shouldn't lose our friendship over just school, and dare I say give our relationship another shot. By the end of the train ride, things almost felt normal, and it felt natural when Nathan showed up to my hotel room the next morning with a cup of coffee for me. Him getting me breakfast while I was running late really felt like progress, especially since that was something we used to do for each other when we were still together. It even made me start daydreaming about even being in a relationship with him again. All felt right in the world. That was until I noticed something had changed in me. About halfway through the first day of the conference, I felt like I was in a hyper-focused mode, as if someone had filtered out the white noise in my brain and just left the sharpest, most productive parts behind. When I gave impromptu speeches, I found myself having extra time to think as if time was going by slower than usual. And when the time for questions came, I asked the most precise, detail-oriented questions that highlighted major flaws in my opponent's arguments. Unfortunately, Nathan fell into this category. Somehow, I was beating everyone in the debate room, including him. By the second night, it was obvious that I was going to win. I was just hoping this wouldn't cause a rift in our friendship because we were just starting to become close again. But all my concerns melted away because the next morning, Nathan came to my room and gave me a morning coffee to prep me for the day, even though he was somewhat agitated. So 3 days in a row, Nathan brought me coffee, competed against me during the day, and chilled at night. But on the 4th and final day of the competition, everything was even more tense than usual. My anxiety only grew when Nathan failed to deliver me a morning coffee. I tried not to think anything of it initially because it could have just been a coincidence, but then, Nathan didn't show up to the debate at all. He completely skipped the final day of the competition. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I ran to his hotel room the second the committee session ended. After banging on his door for 5 minutes straight, he finally let me in, but the moment I stepped inside, Nathan exploded at me, asking how it was possible for me to be performing so well. I was going to make some lighthearted joke because I genuinely had no idea how I managed to improve so much in just 4 days. Everything that happened during this conference put all my other work these past 4 years to shame, which was saying a lot since my senior year was the best I had ever performed. But I never got a word out, because Nathan immediately went on a chauvinistic, narcissistic tangent and revealed something truly insane. He had been trying to sabotage me from the very first day. Apparently he felt that this competition was the perfect thing to round out his application, and he really wanted it on his LinkedIn biography so he could call himself an international debate champion, and so he had played dirty to try to win. What I thought was old friends catching up over a cup of coffee was actually Nathan giving me lace coffee to make me lose the competition. At least that's what he thought. Nathan told me that he had tried to intentionally buy me coffee with psychedelics and legal psilocybin alternatives in it, hoping that it would make me loopy, distracted, and confused. But I knew the coffee he had given me was the opposite of psychedelic. If anything, it was focus-enhancing, and I felt ultra-productive. I asked Nathan for the exact coffee brand he had bought and looked it up to confirm what I already knew, that the psychedelic coffee he bought had nothing to do with psychedelics. It was simply a mushroom coffee fusion blend. It was called Clarity Brew, and from the name I could sort of understand why Nathan might think that it was for a psychedelic type of clarity, but the actual product description made it clear that this coffee was a blessing, not a curse. The mushrooms Nathan had thought would hurt my chances of winning this competition were chaga mushrooms and lion's mane, which botanists will know are just cognitive power banks for the mind. I respected Nathan wholeheartedly until this point, but never in my life did I think that he would be capable of such a low-level Sigma IQ move. And even though Nathan had basically tried to poison me with this coffee, It worked so well on me that once I was done yelling at him, I took the Clarity brew with me to confiscate it only to bring it all the way home so I could continue using the coffee until the end of senior year. That was when I discovered that the coffee didn't just make me more productive, it gave me long-lasting energy and naturally minimized the jittery effects of caffeine. Nathan had basically bought me super coffee in an attempt to drag me down. To no one's surprise, I won the competition and was later accepted to Harvard. Nathan was not. We still text sometimes, and he's apologized a lot for what he did. I've even started connecting him to a few people at Harvard to help him out with some research opportunities because I just want to be the bigger person here. Hopefully one day, he'll be the same way. Edit. Okay, wait. Thanks so much for all the comments. I think you guys are right about him just using me for networking. I've decided to block Nathan and cut contact with him permanently, because you're right. He lost the privilege of being my friend the day he tried to drug me. Though yes, I still do take Clarity brew. My sister has been lying about our family for years and has made us out to be abusive and extremely homophobic to her friends, and they just contacted me. So about 3 years ago my older sister Leah's personality basically did a 180 overnight, as she went from being the sweet reliable big sis to very snappy and closed off. She stopped doing chores and would get an attitude if anyone reminded her that she needed to help around the house. She even bit me on one occasion when I asked her to help me with the dishes. I was 12 at the time, so I wondered why was she acting like that. In the beginning of her turnaround my parents choked it up to teenage girl hormones, but one night she came out of her room crying and told us she is bi. My parents were extremely supportive of this, so was my older brother because he's gay. I wasn't educated on this kind of stuff at the time, so I didn't get it until my parents explained it to me and why it was such a big deal to her, and I was just like, cool, good for you sis. Her behavior got better after that and she was being nice to us again. She didn't hang out with me as much though. So fast forward 3 years later, me and my sister are really close again. Or at least I thought we were. One thing my parents and I have noticed is that her friends have started acting very weird towards us. Like they wouldn't talk to us when they came over even if we said hi, or would occasionally make backhanded remarks or roll their eyes when we spoke. It was weird, but again this was only when they came over, which was rarely, so me and my parents kinda just brushed them off like whatever, they don't have to like us. Well, I just found out why they act like this. An hour ago I was peacefully binge watching an anime when my phone started buzzing like crazy. When I checked I was added into a group chat on Instagram by her friends. In this group chat they were basically bashing me for being a horrible person. They were calling me homophobic, a spoiled brat, terrible sister, golden child, homewrecker. Kept telling me I need to apologize to my sister for abusing her, so I was obviously confused. When I expressed my confusion to them they told me to stop acting dumb and innocent. Later they realized I was being serious and genuinely did not know what they were talking about. That's when they sent me a bunch of screenshots between them and my sister. To sum things up, my sister has fed her friends a very wild story about her life and how we treat her. She has told them the following things: our parents are extremely homophobic and are kicking her out at 18 because of her being bi. When she came out I quickly became the favorite child. I'm spoiled and get everything I want, and because of this I treat her badly for fun. I hit her, steal/break her things, verbally abuse her and call her homophobic slurs. Not only do my parents allow it, they encourage it. She's forced to do all of the chores and cooking in the house, including cleaning my room. This girl does not know how to cook. She lied about other stuff like having autism and me making fun of her for it, which is crazy because I'm the one with autism. There's so much more. The screenshots go back like 2 years, so she's been telling them this for close to 3 years. I asked them why it's taken them this long to confront me. They said she begged them not to confront or talk to us about it because apparently it will make things worse for her, and her plan was just to go no contact with us when she's 18, but they couldn't hold back this time because the most recent thing she told them was that apparently I found out about the guy she likes and immediately found his social media and started texting him to spread lies about her, and now he won't talk to her. I debunked as much as I could, sent them pics from pride festivals we went to with her, sent them pics of us, sent them pics of my brother with his boyfriend. They were ticked, but I asked them not to do anything. Until I figured out how to deal with it, because apparently my sister is the abused black sheep of the family. They agreed. I discovered my husband's disturbing last letter to his deceased mother, which he lost, so I showed it to him and made him cry. My mother-in-law was an angel of a woman, but sadly she passed away 3 years ago from terminal cancer. She welcomed me into her home when I was 17 and was kicked out by my abusive parents, and she was like a mother figure to me, which I never had. Her death impacted our lives greatly, and we mourned for a very long time. I remember when she had a few months left to live, my husband started working on an enormous handwritten letter to her which he was going to give to her on her last days as his way of saying goodbye. I remember my husband showing me the letter and he was totally okay with me reading it, as she and I were always super close. Unfortunately, this letter, which was about 30 pages long, went missing one day. My husband swears he left it in his drawer, but after turning the house upside down for days on end we were never able to find it. I grilled him about it, sometimes blaming him for being so careless for losing it. My husband has cried many times about it, and he says losing this letter is the biggest regret of his entire life. I cried a lot about it too, as some of the things I read in it were so beautiful, and it was something I know my late mother-in-law would have cherished deeply in her final moments. Well, We are moving house soon, and yesterday I was clearing out the attic, something I have never done in the 8 years we have lived in this house, and I stumbled upon a familiar notebook. I wasn't sure whether my eyes were deceiving me at first, but then I looked closer and realized it. It was the notebook which contained the letter. I cried, and even though I probably should have called my husband, I opened it up and started reading in tears. I flicked through the pages, and each page had a subheading which related to the topic he wrote about. I had seen most of them, but one called, "I forgive you for what you did that night, Mom," caught my eye. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading. What I read made me so sick to my stomach. I will copy an extract from the letter below.
"I'm sorry for never discussing this with you, Mom. I know this probably still haunts you to this day, and what you did should be inexcusable. I found myself in therapy for many years and never told you about it. I knew it was a deep and dark memory of your life you wanted to forget. I don't blame you for what you did. It messed me up, but just like everyone, you had your skeletons. The night you came into my room when I was 8 years old and you were very drunk and under the influence of what I now think was grass. I think you thought I was asleep. You were super mom to me, and no matter what influence you were under, you saved us from Dad, and I can never thank you enough. Nonetheless, what you did that night changed me. I'm sure you remember going into my room and starting to try to do things to me. Intimate things. Things you should never in a million years do to your own son. You carried on for a few minutes before stopping. I heard you crying in the bathroom a few minutes later and throwing up. I cried myself to sleep, but very silently. Thankfully you never came back in. You also never noticed how I was in the aftermath. I never held it against you though, not even the day after. You gave me everything. I know what you did was monstrous. But I forgive you, Mom. I forgive you."
I threw up after I read this. My mother-in-law had roped my husband when he was just 8 years old. I stopped packing and cleaning the house after that. I waited for my husband to come home, and when he did I gave him the letter. I didn't say anything, just showed him this. Without even reading it he broke down crying, saying he was sorry for never telling me, he could never bring himself to do so. He told me he means what he says. He forgives her. I held him for a long time. I can't blame him for not telling me, but it does feel like a very weird sense of betrayal. My psychopath mother-in-law just died in a car accident, and my stalker coincidentally disappeared at the same time, plus update. My mother-in-law and I never had a good relationship, and this was down to the fact I was from a poorer family. She has tried to sabotage my relationship with my husband since the day she met me. I wasn't good enough for her handsome and successful boy who was a lawyer, and I was a barista with a single mom. She always let me know this. I contemplated ending my relationship several times, especially when she yanked my engagement ring off my finger and tossed it into a lake when we were on a picnic. Thankfully my husband always showed that he is on my side. And I love him. A few years ago, I started getting very threatening and scary emails and texts from someone named Pax. This Pax knew everything about me. It didn't matter how many emails and phone numbers I changed, they always found me. I made several reports but nothing happened. My husband tried everything to trace the emails. Nothing came out of it. This past year I basically never left the apartment alone, as when I did I was sent pictures of me walking. My mother-in-law died in a car accident while driving drunk 1 month ago. She took the life of a mother and a baby in another car too. Now, I haven't received a single threatening text or email from Pax in a month. After a few days I wasn't surprised. Felt like I always knew it was her deep down. My husband hasn't reacted yet. He's consumed with his grief and I don't want to bother him, especially when he bitterly told me, "You must be very pleased now," when we heard the news, and I tried to comfort him. He apologized later and said he was just feeling guilty that he loved and chose me more than he loved her. Now I'm waiting for him to connect the dots. Will he get it? Update: I started living like I never did before. With 10 minutes walks alone, then 15, then half an hour and so on. At first my husband didn't notice my freedom, or maybe he did but was processing it himself. Last Friday I told him that I was going out with the girls alone. He kissed me and wished me a nice evening. When I came home around midnight, he was still up. He said that he wanted to talk to me. He asked me, "Was my mother your stalker?" I said yes, and he broke down crying. He said he has always suspected her and even talked to her a couple of times about it, and she made him so guilty by accusing him of being a simp. He said he noticed how I, after so many years of fear and anxiety, stopped eventually crying in my sleep, and he noticed that I haven't woken him up for a month now to cuddle me back to sleep. He apologized for never discussing it with me and never protected me from his family even though he had suspicions. Honestly, I'm not even mad or disappointed. If the police couldn't help me, I don't know how much my husband could have done, and I just want to move on and leave this behind. We are going to start couples therapy, and my husband is planning to tell his family that mother-in-law was my stalker. He is adamant about it, and honestly I think it's a good idea. My husband has also decided not to attend the headstone setting on mother-in-law's grave.
I took my girlfriend out and made her pay. I don't know why she's upset. My girlfriend and I are not flat broke, but we are in a place where saving money is a priority. She budgets beautifully, and is wonderful with saving money, therefore it is fair to say she has more money than I do. My girlfriend makes it a point to make us go out to dinner once a week or every other week. Whenever the bill comes, the waiter hands me the check, and without missing a beat I always ask her, "Can you pay?" She always agrees. I think this is such a nice perk in the relationship. I like when she takes me on dates, it makes me feel good about saving my money, and she has more than me anyway so she needs it less. I have good food, she spends the whole evening asking about me, complimenting me, enjoying my company, and planning our future. The problem came up last night when she had a huge craving for appetizers and margaritas. She complained about spending her day off cleaning the entire kitchen and she didn't want to dirty any other dishes. I suggested we go out, and she didn't see a problem with it. We had a great meal. Between the two of us we had a few margaritas and the bill was adding up. Before the bill came she asked if I would mind if we split the check, and began to explain how much these nights out are really eating away at her food budget. This is where I got confused. I would have never offered if I knew I would have to pay for my half. She also jabbed at me for always letting her pay, and never once offering. She feels she's being taken advantage of, and if it wasn't for her, we would never go on dates because she's the one who pays. We had a small argument, she got really upset, paid the check, and we walked home without speaking. I said we just won't go out to dinner anymore. This suggestion or any other suggestions wasn't helpful. She's been distant and incredibly upset and is now mentioning the weirdest problems and making me feel like a bad boyfriend. She's even mentioned wanting to break up, over a $140 check. My portion of the bill was $95 by the way. Got into a street fight over a burger, and ended up in the hospital. I'm typing this on my hospital bed right now because I know my story needs to be heard. I was hit with snow in New York City after leaving my comedy class. If you live in the city you know about the massive snowstorm that hit us. I've never seen bigger snowflakes in my life, each drop felt like a sucker punch to the face. As I walked in the snow back to my place I had to pee so badly, but my walk was 50 minutes away. I tried not to slip on the icy sidewalks and ultimately decided to stop into a Five Guys. I ordered a double cheeseburger just so I'd be able to technically use their bathroom. I tried opening the bathroom door but it only slightly opened. I told a worker and he said it opens, you just gotta shimmy it a little bit more. I shimmied it more and I swung the door open. A broom inside fell down and I realized it was holding the door in place. A man was banging a girl on top of the sink, butt booty naked and all. He turned his head onto me and bro started seeing red. I told him I was sorry and tried closing the door but dude pulled his pants back up and started rushing me. I started backing and speed walking out of the Five Guys as he was rushing me. Once he zipped up his pants I tried running when I got out the door and I got an immediate punch to the back of my head. I put my hands around my head and admittedly took a couple body shots. I kept screaming at bro to get the hell off of me and swung a couple punches and kicks. I messed up when I realized my foot landed up his testes. Bro was the Hulk, he didn't even flinch, he had balls of steel. He just kept going at me complaining about how I embarrassed him in front of his cousin and blah blah blah. Eventually he smartened up and sweeped me on icy concrete. I fell and broke something. I kept crying and wailing on the street. Eventually I was taken to a hospital in an ambulance and was told that I broke my coccyx. Have fun looking that up. Edit. Many of you asked if I was the guy in that TikTok video. Yeah, the Five Guys burger ice flip video. I abandoned my family because they deserved it. I abandoned my wife and my 13-year-old daughter a week after I discovered my wife's affair. It's now almost 6 months since that day. Our marriage had plenty of intimacy and was in good shape. I came home late from work, and there was a safety training seminar I had to attend. My wife Eve was sleeping on the sofa and a message with some emojis popped up on her phone. Emojis like I would use when I message her. I snooped and I found out what had been going on for at least 5 months. I knew the affair partner, Adam, he was a work colleague of hers. He was married and had 3 children. While reading the messages something just snapped in my head. Over the course of reading their messages, I went from loving Eve more than anything, to hating her to just going blank. Not just about her, but everything. Totally numb, I took pictures of the messages and went to bed. Eve was mad the next day that I went to bed without waking her up. She complained about neck pain from sleeping on the couch all night. During breakfast I didn't say a single word, my wife and daughter chatted away. They didn't seem to notice anything different about me. Or even acknowledge me. But I definitely didn't feel like myself. I went through all the daily motions, I went to work, did all the normal stuff. The only difference is I sort of stopped talking. Sadly I realized that nobody seemed to even notice. It's like I wasn't even there. I started to understand that Eve and my daughter didn't really love me. I was in the house with them, but unless they wanted something from me they didn't really interact. I would get these pangs of pain, they would come and go. Sometimes they would overwhelm me completely. I walked around like this for 5 days before Eve asked me if something was wrong during dinner. I had maybe uttered 3 words in total to her and my daughter in that period. I didn't even answer her question, I just made a confused face, then continued eating. She seemed okay with that. The next day I didn't go to work. I didn't really have a plan. I put it in my car and walked around the neighborhood for a while. I ended up at the kitchen table waiting for the wife to come home. She came home with a few bags of groceries. She immediately started talking about her day while unpacking. I just sat at the kitchen table in pain. She didn't even look at me apart from one glance as she entered the kitchen. Daughter popped in and did the same. Their backs were turned to me and they talked about some trivial crap on sale. I have never felt so rejected, unappreciated, so alone. I was thinking back on our lives and all I could see was that they didn't care about me at all. They probably never did, I was an accessory to their life. I was hit with a wave of pain, I cried, still they didn't notice so I got angry, very angry. I had a glass of water in front of me, I stood up and threw it hard at the tiles over the sink. It just exploded, glass shards rained over everything. They froze, unsure what to do when they saw my contorted tear-soaked face. It was uncomfortably quiet for a long while before I spoke. Eve, I know all about your cheating with Adam. My daughter looked at Eve. What? Is that true, Mom? Eve started to try to explain. She briefly glanced at me and said, sorry, I can explain. Then she turned back to our daughter and they started arguing. Again, it was like I was invisible or something. After a few minutes watching their increasingly heated argument, I just walked out and got in my car. I looked at them again through the window, still arguing in the kitchen. They didn't even notice I had left. I sat there for a few more minutes before I gave up and just drove off. It took maybe 15 minutes before Eve tried to call me, then call after call after call, then a flood of texts from both of them. I just ignored it and eventually turned the phone off. The next day I took half of our money out and called my boss. I told him I didn't know when I would be back. He told me if I didn't show up I was fired. I just told him okay and hung up. I just didn't care. I went to Adam's house, his wife opened. I gave her a copy of the messages and told her what Adam and my wife had been up to. I left her crying on the stairs. At the end of the day I ended up in a cheap hotel at the edge of town. The next few days were kind of a blur. Eve's older brother is a cop named Bob. Bob showed up on the 4th day. I don't know how he found me. He tried to interrogate me, but I didn't say anything. When I didn't engage, he told me I was under arrest and put me in cuffs. However, he didn't take me to the station like I expected. He took me home instead. Bob dragged me into the living room where my wife and daughter immediately started berating me. Still I said nothing. I just listened in amazement while they told me how terrible this was for them. What a terrible a-hole I was for making them worry. It went on for a while. In the end Eve screamed at me, say something. I stared at her for a while before calmly saying, I have nothing to say to you, Beach. Bob freaked out, and slammed me against the wall, screaming at me to not talk to his sister that way. I got a lot of satisfaction out of Bob's violent reaction. I don't know why, it made me so happy I was laughing. Bob's wife left him 4 months earlier. I smiled at Bob. You're pathetic, Bob. Did you hurt your wife, Bob? Is that why she left you? Bob hurt me hard. I went down. Wife and daughter started screaming their heads off. As I started to get up I just laughed even harder. I just couldn't help myself. I am still in handcuffs, laughing. I said, F you, Bob. He knocked me out cold this time. I woke up in the hospital. I puked all over the floor the second I opened my eyes, so I knew I had a concussion. Eve, Bob and my daughter were there. They were talking to me. I was too confused to make it out. A nurse appeared and asked them to leave. She got me a pan to puke in and called someone to clean. While she was taking my pulse, I told her that my family put me here and that they were not to come anywhere near me. If they came back into the room I would leave. I would just run away. She argued kind of sternly that running or even getting up was a really bad idea for me. But she would talk to security. I didn't see them again in the hospital. It was bliss. I decided to disappear, to turn into a ghost. I wanted nothing to do with these people ever again. I made a letter to each of them. I warned Bob that if he ever bothered me again I would report him. I told my daughter that Eve had betrayed me and that she would be without a father from now on. To Eve I made a longer letter. I tried to be as practical as possible. I told her to sell the house, that I won't be paying the mortgage or utilities anymore. I told her reconciliation, or even contact, was impossible, especially after she had sent her brother to drag me back and hurt me senseless in front of them. I explained that I won't do anything for her ever again, so if she wants a divorce she will have to arrange it. I told her I will disappear and I don't want to be found. I ended it with, if she interferes with my life again I will simply end myself. I really regret giving her that last sentence. It's like I let her steal a little bit more of me, like I let her give me a little more pain. In the hospital I made a plan on how I could disappear. Eve gave the hospital some fresh clothes that they forwarded to me. Then one evening I just went out the rear fire escape. I triggered some kind of alarm. I was panicking a bit, but thankfully no one stopped me. I got back to the hotel to pick up my car. I traded it with a small RV and set off. I got a new phone. The only person I called was my father. I told him everything and told him if he gave my new number to anyone I would become totally unreachable, forever. He could call me if he needed to reach me, if I needed to sign something. Other than that I wanted to be left alone. For the first few months I grieved the loss of my old life, but I came to realize that I grieved the loss of a fantasy. A memory that only existed in my head. The loving wife and daughter, the family, friends. It was all just an illusion in my head. These people never really cared for me. Over time I started to rebuild. Only this time I was a total ghost. I rent a safety deposit box to keep valuables and cash. I do odd jobs for money. I hunt and fish and scavenge. My money consumption is insignificant, so my cash reserves are actually growing. I don't pay taxes, I don't have a bank account. When people ask my name I answer, people call me Fred. I go out of my way to not contribute to society or anything else for that matter. All in all my life is getting better. At least now no one is using me for nothing but their own benefit while pretending they care about me. I don't know what happened to my wife and daughter, my old friends, or the rest of the family. I don't know if I am divorced now or if I owe child support. I don't know what happened to the house. I don't really care. My father has tried to give me information a few times but I shut that down hard. He is the only one I speak to occasionally from my old life.